Battling the flu for days on end could be a thing of the past if a new drug known as GR121167 is everything the manufacturers claim. The Hunter Urban Division of GPs is taking part in a nationwide study of the effectiveness of the drug as a weapon against flu.
The main symptoms that we're looking for are a headache, that dreadful aching people get when they get the flu, and of course fever. And of course the big one is that these people feel like they've been knocked over by a truck.
The trial is twofold. 80 students, residents from Irene Hall, are taking part in an experiment to see if the drug can actually prevent the flu.
Well, the drug we hope has in fact prevented the flu in those students who've been in fact taking the active drug, and not prevented the flu in the students who were taking the inactive drug.
Also of interest, whether the drug can quickly cure the symptoms. Dr Sprogers says people who develop the flu and live in Newcastle could be eligible to take part in the trial.
We're looking for people who've got the flu. They then take the drug within 36 hours of being sick. And again, we hope that that shortens the duration of the illness, how long they have it, as well as making them, I guess, feel better faster.
The flu is especially dangerous to the elderly and the very young. While the results of the research are not yet available, the development of a quick fix drug would have far-reaching benefits. Jane Anderson, NBN News. Anthony Parks has been breeding native birds at Belmont, south of Newcastle, for 6 years. But this is all that is left of his profitable passion.
This is heartbreaking. This is 6-7 years' work that's just down the drain in one night of vandalism or a theft.
6 birds survived the pillage on Saturday night. 50 were either stolen, killed or escaped capture. Anthony Parks says the birds which escaped were born in captivity and won't survive the cold weather and lack of food. Many were about to hatch young that will now also die.
I've come home and discovered my birds missing. Someone's obviously broken the locks off and cut the wire, and just I've either let them go or selectively stolen birds and let the rest go.
Parks believes many of the stolen birds, including king parrots, rare red princess parrots and Stanley parrots, will be sold on the black market. Mr Parks warns breeders to watch for people selling unregistered native birds.
Just be wary of birds being sold either cheaply or normal prices from someone that's not registered, because there is an Australian registration service.
This theft is now a matter for the police, but Mr Parks warns other breeders to improve security surrounding their birds. Jane Anderson, NBN News. Dr Tim Smythe made his comments about the future direction of hospitals in Newcastle while officially opening expanded services at Belmont Hospital. Advertisements were placed in papers at the weekend, calling for applications from anyone interested in heading the hospital planning study, the position to be filled by October.
This study will be looking at acute hospital needs in Newcastle for the next 15 years, a very important planning study for the Hunter.
While a person or organisation which takes on the job will look at a range of options, Dr Smythe favours one scenario.
One key option should be expanding the John Hunter Hospital, and also the possibility of building a totally new hospital on the west of Lake Macquarie in the coming years.
Meanwhile, the health service improvements opened today included the relocation of the Child Health Centre to the Belmont Hospital grounds. Also, operating equipment worth $100,000 will mean an increase in elective surgery at Belmont.
We'll be doing an additional 30 operations a week, particularly ear, nose and throat surgery, orthopaedics and a range of other general surgery.
Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Returning from a long break in the NBL season, the Falcons made a sluggish start against Canberra. The defensive effort not matched at the other end, and missed opportunities gave the Cannons a 5-point advantage at half-time. But the complexion of the game changed in the second half. American import Derek Rucker found the target regularly after an indifferent first session.
I felt good in the first half, just some shots didn't go down, and sometimes it takes a couple shots to go down for you to finally kind of break loose and get your flow going, and that's what happened to me in the second half.
He was ably supported by captain Terry Dozier, with Tony Jensen and Marty McLean's defensive effort keeping the Cannons' Fred Cofield quiet. Delighted with the win, further good news followed with the Suns upsetting Illawarra and then the Cannons bouncing back to defeat the Gold Coast. The Falcons now have a comfortable break in 8th position, but are leaving nothing to chance, particularly against the Tassie Devils at home this Saturday.
Hobart have two good Americans. They're very athletic, and on any night they can compete with anybody in this league. When we played them down there at Derwent.
For years, Council has turned a blind eye to sandwich boards and goods on the footpath of Gloucester's main street. But the matter has gained wide recognition as the question of liability has come into play.
The shopkeeper will have some liability, but of course in a lot of these cases insurance companies will make the council jointly liable to end up with a bigger payout.
When put to council, 6 of the 9 councillors declared an interest in the matter and it couldn't be debated. The councillors are owners of some of the businesses in question. The General Manager has approached the Minister for Local Government, Ted Pickering, requesting all councillors be permitted to take part in making the decision.
3 councillors can't really determine the matter. That's not the right thing, so I think the Minister will have to go that way.
Norm MacLeod denies councillors with an interest will use the opportunity to promote their own businesses. He's already recommended council-approved signs on footpaths, but not on goods except on specified days. A response from the Minister is expected in the next few weeks. Tracy Walsh, NBN News.
"17-year-old Melody McDonald died in April this year when this house in Fullerton Street, Stockton, caught alight. She was staying with her boyfriend Chad Morgan, who managed to scramble through a window to safety.
It just went up so quick. The house is just an old weatherboard place. It was like kindling, it just went straight up.
Today, Coroner Col Elliott found the fire had been caused by a candle which burnt through a plastic ice cream container. It was the second such blaze in the Newcastle area. In July 1991, 2 girls died when candles they were using for lighting tipped over. On that occasion, and again today, Mr Elliott called for the installation of fire detection devices in all homes. He said, "I understand they cost less than $50. He went on to say, "I can only urge members of the public to ensure that such alarms are installed, particularly in older weatherboard homes." Mr Elliott also wants insurance companies to make it a condition of their policies. The Stockton tragedy spurred that local community to embark on just that. The Prawners and Lions clubs, in conjunction with the local fire brigade, are trying to install detectors in every house in the suburb. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
The crowd swelled for day 2 of AgQuip with more new ideas for agriculture, new products and techniques. It's a huge rural supermarket, a multi-million-dollar sales bonanza. And while AgQuip is a huge money spinner for the exhibitors, the Gunnedah region itself is also reaping a rich harvest.
Major investment in Gunnedah AgQuip, both in terms of people being attracted to the town, focuses the tourism on Gunnedah and also the benefit to the service providers throughout Gunnedah.
Financial spin-offs are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The no vacancy signs up. It's almost impossible to get a room in the area during the AgQuip week. Back at the site, and a dire prediction for farmers with the drought cutting production.
We've got a year that we look like having the lowest grain production in New South Wales since around about 1957.
To make ends meet, one farmer has developed a special hay feeder he's trying to sell at the field days. He is making nothing on the land. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Hoping to reverse a $900,000 loss accrued over the last 3 years, Falcons management drew up a restructuring plan. To gain the National Basketball League's approval, a $200,000 cut in the Falcons' budget was required. This relied in part on the Newcastle Showground Trust, which manages the Falcons' home court, granting the club concessions.
We have come to an arrangement, and we're delighted with this, which allows the Falcons to go on with their restructuring and continue to play in Newcastle.
The restructuring also involves a shift in ownership of the Falcons to Newcastle interests, away from Sydney partners John Saunders and John Horsell, plus developing a broader shareholder base.
That will incorporate having a Newcastle-based chairperson and a new board of directors, which reflects the new ownership.
While the Trust is lending a helping hand to the Falcons, it's also a two-way street. Trust members recognise the vital role the Falcons play in helping to promote the entertainment centre.
Really, this centre exists because of an approach by the then owners of the Falcons to have a bigger venue. It grew into what it is after that. We do consider them as one of our anchor tenant.
The NRMA says the 165,000 Newcastle and Hunter members will each receive at least $500 worth of shares. 90,000 members with more than 10 years membership and an insurance policy, $1,200 in shares.
The average Australians, those who drive a 78 Datsun or 84 Ford or an 89 Commodore, are going to own this Australian blue chip company. And normally these kind of companies are owned by people who own Rolls-Royce and Fairlanes.
But with the announcement of a possible float, some members have questioned that one group could buy the majority of shares and take control of the NRMA. NRMA President Don Mackay says this can't happen.
We've negotiated with the Stock Exchange a 5% limitation on the number of shares that can be held by any one member, and that's in our articles, and that continues until the year 2000.
The NRMA says there will be no changes in road service and no increase in charges with the change from a mutual structure to a publicly listed company. The conversion is subject to the approval by 75% of NRMA members, who will vote on October 19. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The Hunter's first railway station in 60 years will be built at Metford, in the narrowly held Liberal seat of Maitland.
We certainly hope we do win the marginal seat of Maitland. According to the polls I've seen, it's looking quite good. But it's about transport in the Hunter Valley. It is about having an effective local member, and Peter Blackmore has been effective.
Transport Minister Bruce Baird made the multi-million-dollar commitment while in Newcastle to officially open the new-look Hamilton bus depot, which was rebuilt after the 1989 earthquake. This now famous vision was filmed as the quake rocked the depot. The new facilities include a maintenance workshop and a customer area. There was one group noticeably absent from this morning's official ceremony. The bus drivers and their union representatives boycotted the event.
There's been approximately 80 positions gone here. Part-time employment has also entered the industry.
The union also fears the Liberal government will privatise Newcastle buses.
They're boycotting on a furphy and that we're supposed to be privatising. It's not on my agenda, it's not on anybody's agenda.
As for cutting the railway line at Civic, Bruce Baird says the decision is up to Planning Minister Robert Webster. Results of a transport planning study should be released soon. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
David Wade looked a lonely figure as the team had its last session before heading south for the clash with Illawarra. There was no sign of nerves, the players keen to see their soon-to-be replaced coach out on a winning note. New boys Grogan and Eager will make their first grade debut. Steve Crow also back in the top ranks, filling in for the Chief, who is out on suspension. The clash with the Steelers is also critical for Mark Sargent and Matthew Johns. It's their last chance to impress selectors for the Kangaroo Tour. Illawarra will be particularly tough at home, especially as they still have the sniff of a semi-final spot if Balmain gets up against the Broncos.
Since the 1920s, halon's ability to neutralise oxygen and so extinguish fires had been considered a godsend. But now people realise that oxygen-depleting quality also dissolves the all-important ozone layer, which filters the sun's harmful rays. Australia signed the 1992 Montreal Agreement to rid the world of ozone-depleting substances, and the Department of Administrative Services is on the job.
We've already stopped the importation and manufacture of halon. The job now is to collect and destroy the rest by the end of next year.
Science students from Waratah Technology High helped the Minister load BHP's 300 fire extinguishers aboard the Halon Banks truck. The collection task nationally is being coordinated by Susan Clark. It's up to her to collect the 4,000 tonnes contained in 2 million Halon fire extinguishers and ensure their safe disposal.
If you throw it away, the cylinder will corrode and ultimately the halon will be leaked, so we've not solved the problem.
For big businesses, changing over to safer firefighting is not so easy. Costly replacement systems have to be installed first. But for the average household, the task is a lot simpler and cost-free.
If it's just a normal household or domestic type use or a small business, they can just drop it off to their local fire brigades, and the fire brigades will organise for us to come out and collect it when they've got a little stockpile of it.
In spring, we want to spend more time outdoors, so now is the time to spread the word on halon gas and not the hole in the ozone layer.
Ray Parsons was just 12 years old when he signed up with the Central Coast's Red Bus Company 53 years ago. It's not surprising that some of the most important events of Ray's life happened while he was behind the wheel.
I drove my wife to school. Later on then I married her, so I suppose that she'd have to be one of the most important passengers that I ever had.
The veteran coach captain has seen his hometown change from a tiny bayside settlement to a sprawling metropolis. The company's operations have grown from 7 buses to 83. Ray's final route today took him from the entrance to Gosford and Batteau Bay.
Every passenger that I've carried has been an important passenger to me, because without the passengers I wouldn't have a job.
A tourist coach driver for 30 years, Ray's covered every corner of the country. Now he says it's time to see Australia without the driver's uniform.
It's probably a bit sad after all these years working, leaving all your mates that you work with and all the passengers that travel on your bus. Sad, but then It's got to happen one day, isn't it?
It's the one day of the year where everyone knows they can help. Cars and buildings donned them, children played with them, and one school in Sydney covered its dome-shaped assembly hall, all in support of Red Nose Day. This year's awareness campaign into sudden infant death syndrome is a special occasion for Newcastle's coordinator Jenny Richards. On Tuesday, Jenny and husband Mark gave birth to a healthy boy. 5 years ago, the Richards lost their second child by cot death, and now young Nathan can help mum and dad spread the message.
It was a bit of a shock when we found out that he would be due around Red Nose Day, but now that he's here, we couldn't be happier.
Research into SIDS has already helped reduce cot deaths in New South Wales by 52%. It's about the same result for the hunter. Last year, the region raised $118,000. It's hoped that figure will increase.
There are still a lot of babies dying and we don't know why, so we have to continue the research and we have to continue the public education to ensure that as many babies as possible are saved.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
The sight of water birds in the Tips catchment pond seems as much a surprise as some of the plans in store for the site. Contour work has already begun to turn it into a golf course. A green fairway will roll over the mounds of rubbish. In what seems an odd coexistence, several species of water birds seem content to frequent the area, along with the throngs of weekend rubbish dumpers.
What we have is our leachate ponds, and those ponds will be there for 30 odd years. We've got to keep those there while there's leachate coming out of the tip, but it clears off very well and the birds love it, and there's more birds in them ponds than what there are in the wetlands.
But far from being a blight on the landscape bulging at its seams, Deputy Mayor Frank Rigby sees the tip in a whole new light. With its days as a dump numbered and the Summerhill landfill due to come online early next year, the Shortland site is already being probed for useful pockets of methane gas. Feasibility studies are being carried out into whether the gas reserves could be harnessed to power heating plants.
That will be all capped off, and then we'll be pumping gas out of there, and that gas will pump out for 30 or 40 years. And we're doing tests now with Shortland electricity with a view to either using the gas as heating or turning it into electricity and using the electricity for that we can put that into the main grid or use it for heating swimming pools and those sort of things.
Over the next 3 days, 167 gymnasts from around the state will be competing in the New South Wales Combined High School Championships. Today it was the Level 5's turn to display their talents. Melanie Jones from Whitebridge excelling on the floor to win her section. Bomaderry's Carly Badnell also dominated on this apparatus, taking out her division. Wagga's Brad Moss took home a trophy for his floor routine, while Michael Kennedy, also of Wagga, made it too, winning the high bar section. To the beam, and Manly's Yvette Bellamy showed balance and agility to claim first prize, with Lee Gabor from Coffs Harbour proving superior on the bar. Competition continues tomorrow. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Life doesn't move too quickly at Limeburners Creek north of Raymond Terrace. Most people pass the tiny town by. For 134 years, the post office has been a focal point for the community. There are no shops, there is no police station. For 42 years, Dot Hollingsworth has been stamping letters and posting parcels, taking on the job with her husband Clyde. Clyde passed away in 1971, Mrs. Hollingsworth continuing to work on. But today was the end of a tradition, the last day for the Limeburners Creek post office.
We've had some good times and some bad times, of course. It has been a wonderful period.
For the community of around 200 people, it's a terrible loss.
She's been more than a postmistress. She's been a friend to just about everybody on the creek, and while we'll still keep in touch with her, it just won't be the same, not being able to pop into the office and say hello.
Mrs. Hollingsworth knocked back and offered to run the post office as her own business. But at 83, she won't sit back and do nothing. There's work in the garden and house to be done.
A state government review has recommended the removal of child support services from women's refuges. If adopted, Delise Manton says this would particularly disadvantage Koori women and children.
Our biggest main concern as coming from a Koori refuge, that they are trying to get rid of our workers, Koori workers, and also the migrant workers from out of the refuge movement.
The review recommends the needs of Koori children be met by specialist organisations separate to the refuge. Delise says there are no such services run by Koori staff, and many Koori women fear the mainstream state welfare system.
Our children being taken away for no reason at all and just placed in a lot of institutions or fostered out.
A spokesperson for Community Services Minister Jim Longley says the review was done to assess how well the supported accommodation program is working. Any changes will involve extensive consultation with the community first. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
While the 700 striking workers continued their picket today, both the union and Tomago management headed for the Industrial Commission, neither party willing to back down on the wage rise dispute. The workers have already received a 2% increase. The union wants a further 8%. Management is offering 3%. Smelter manager Barry Goldstiver says there are several Australian customers urgently wanting aluminium. He's warned trucks with police escorts might be brought in to cross the picket lines. Since the strike began on August 12th, 300 staff members have been operating Tomago. But with fatigue setting in, management says it will begin closing the second of the smelter's 3 pot lines on Monday.
If we have to close down potline 2, in order to roster our staff for adequate breaks, that will create redundancies and those people will have to be retrenched.
During today's industrial hearing, Commissioner Merriman didn't order the strikers back to work, but did put an undisclosed proposal to FIME rep Bob Williams. He'll present this to members tomorrow.
Even if we go back to work, it's still got to go through the channels of the arbitration, and at the end of the day that we get 1% more than what this manager is offering us, and it's still a win.
Pragmatism's under pressure. Here's Big Risk coming into the action. Noisy Piers run up behind them and looking for an out and gets out now. Bass Drum in front of Town Oak. Noisy Pier, Big Risk and Moon Chase between runners. It's still Bass Drum from Town Oak. Noisy Pier and Big Risk on the outside. Town Oak's been no closer than 3 wide all the way. He goes to Bass Drum and wins the cup. Town Oak a long neck base.
Ridden by Shane Dye, Town Oak returns $6.70 and $2.40. The Bolter Bass Drum $30.90 and Noisy Pier $1.90. Town Oak and Noisy Pier will now both be set for the Newcastle Gold Cup.
It was several weeks ago water first started creeping into the backyards of dozens of homeowners whose properties border on Moffat Swamp. At one stage, the water virtually lapped some people's back doors, submerging children's play equipment.
We can't have a children visit here without supervising them full time because they can walk out down there and drown in our own backyard.
This morning, residents voiced their frustration to representatives from the Port Stephens Council, the Hunter Water Board, the EPA and the National Parks and Wildlife Service. They were told the problem began 18 months ago when a spillway that was part of a plan to prevent Moffat Swamp from draining was made 60 centimetres too high. When Saltash residents found themselves in a similar situation, Council's response was to block part of the flow from the spillway using sand. It literally shifted the problem from one backyard to another.
It was a tremendous blunder by the council. There's somebody in there isn't pushing the right buttons on the calculator.
The level wasn't the right level. We've discovered that now in this extreme situation.
The latest fear is that diverting the water away from Madawi and into Swan Bay could harm oyster crops. Authorities have yet to decide how to solve the problem.
It's an awkward situation. I mean, there are a number of different authorities involved, including the residents.
They've said they're going to do it, and they've said they will be doing something for the last 2 weeks, but nothing's happened. And when it happens, well, then I'll believe it.
Joanne Shoebridge, NBN News.
The students at Newcastle University threw caution to the wind and, risking prosecution themselves, rolled and smoked the illegal substance.
It's ridiculous that people can be sent to jail for enjoying something that doesn't harm anyone else, and it's hypocritical that alcohol is legal and marijuana is not.
According to the students, at least 60% of the population has at least tried marijuana, a drug that has been around for the last 12,000 years. The protesters also argue that hemp is an excellent paper source, and if legalised it could replace the wood chip industry. While the students believed there were plainclothes detectives keeping an eye on the protest, police took no action. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The early evening blaze took hold so quickly, volunteer bush firefighters could do little but watch as 2-storey high flames consumed the wooden post office and residents.
Thought no way we could save the post office, so people started worrying about houses, surrounding houses and property.
Firefighters and dozens of volunteers worked through the night, their efforts hampered because there was no pressure in the water mains. By morning, the extent of the destruction was clear, the 100-year-old building destroyed, but it could have been worse. Firefighters say the help of farmers who prevented spot fires spreading to other nearby buildings was invaluable.
Yeah, we had to call a fire brigade unit in from Walgett, as well as 3 private tankers from Collie Farms and Iffley. Without their help, things might have been a bit different.
Physical evidence police from Dubbo were again today investigating the matter. A coronial inquest will almost certainly be held to determine the cause. Joanne Shoebridge, NBN News. With 6 games of the competition left, 5 of those on the road and most of them against teams placed in the top 8, the Falcons face a tough run home. The task starts this weekend with the Doomsday Double, 5th placed Adelaide tomorrow night and Perth Wildcats sitting 6th on Saturday. The Falcons are out to bolster their 11-9 record and consolidate their playoffs position.
We can take a big step toward the playoffs with even one win this weekend on the road. If we get both of them, we're in great shape and really we're capable of winning at either place.
When Newcastle and Adelaide last met in April, the visitors snatched a 2-point victory. Wiseman says his team is ready to turn the tables.
Well, Adelaide in particular are a real double-teaming, aggressive defensive team, and they've got the best defensive yield in the league, so we know that we're going to be up against pressure defence, and we've been working at preparing ourselves for that.
As for Perth, the Falcons beat them on WA turf last year, and Michael Johnson's 8 3-pointers in this season's clash in Newcastle helped the home side can the Cats by 30 points. A win on Saturday would complete the trifecta for the Falcons. Wiseman says all players are fit for the road trip, Terry Dozier free of knee soreness and Paul Kuiper over an ankle strain. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.